Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we're bringing you day 589 of Russian war with Ukraine. As always, with former advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel Alexey Arestovych, Yuri, Romanenko, and Nikolai Feldman. Today they touch upon some very concerning points of this war, and it's not going to be a light stream. Our usual thanks go to our supporters. Thank you, Bill. Your super thanks are awesome. Honor Bejos and Ludmila Skaryantova. Dear members, thank you for staying with us. You guys aid us in creating this channel. And with this, let's dive into day 589. Enjoy. Good evening, everybody. This is Project Alpha. My name is Nikolai Feldman. This is Ukraine War Diary with Alexey Arestovych. Alexey is online with us. Yuri is also online already. Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening. Hello, everybody. Let's start with the tragic news from Ukraine, where in Groza settlement in Kupyansky region, several dozen of absolutely peaceful citizens were killed when they gathered together for the funeral of one of their friends, and Russian missile hit that place, and we already have 48 dead, one 10-year-old boy. Yeah, I actually heard 51 already, but the numbers are always changing at the beginning of this. And yeah, condolences to all relatives of the deceased. And question number one, the fact that this tragedy happens in a rather peaceful town is just not too far from the front line. It tells us again that nobody can feel safe in Ukraine, and we need to follow certain rules. Well, right. It's difficult to demand from common citizens who are not military professionals to follow certain guidelines. Professional, military professional, always you can distinguish them by the sense of danger, and they always analyze consciously, subconsciously the risks wherever they are. It's difficult to demand the same from civil people, and my question would only be turned to administration, because that's generally a city not far from the front line, a settlement near the front line. So it's not to blame them, no, but they need to communicate certain rules and safety protocols. This is the direct responsibility of local administration, police, because that settlement, especially being in the general direction of a big Russian offensive attempt. Right, and several months ago in Kharkov region, in the place where I grew up, in Первомайsk, in the same situation when people were burying some of their friends, Russian missiles hit them as well. So that's a repetition of the same thing. And one needs to understand that, especially if the funeral is of any of those patriotic detachments that we have, volunteer detachments that are fighting on the front, this remains to be dangerous, because in Russia they see anything volunteer in Ukraine as Nazi and nationalistic, and that's their propaganda. So once again, please be careful. And I keep refusing different offers to come and talk to people in person, to gather for a meeting, to do a conversation. I cannot support that while the war is active, because it creates a huge fat target on all the people who are gathered together. So Russian terrorists, they continue killing people, and you guys need to be very vigilant. Right, we need to remind administrations that they need to keep sending that message to their people to be safe, or if they still need to gather together, at least gather in some place that is protected, like a bomb shelter, or All right, what's going on in Russia? A person looking like Putin was talking a couple days ago in Valdai on some meeting. He said some very interesting and curious things, including that Prigozhin killed himself in his jet and nobody shot that jet down. So Wagner is supposedly a finished topic. They already annihilated Prigozhin and the top leadership of that group. Wagner is already recognized as a international terrorist organization in Britain, and core of Wagner is already co-opted by Ministry of Defense. Why is he still talking about that? Is he not forgiven by society? Well, the topic is still alive, and he's not talking just because. It's probably measurements that they did in the society and figured that somebody needs to address this thing. You think he improvises? No, he is not of a quality to improvise in this case. So I think they're just measuring main problems and then providing him with some pre-cooked answers, so maybe he has a slight degree of improvisation while presenting them, but otherwise, not really. And Wagnerites, indeed, they exist, they're still alive, they have certain reputation, they are spread throughout Africa and Russia, Eurasia, and they keep killing people in Russia as well, because very often many of them who came back, they play with grenades, throw them at their enemies, kill some people, and they get disturbed with their PTSDs. And then what? Putin comes out and says that Prigozhin, I can only imagine him sitting there with RPG and clicking the launch button. No, they said he had a hand grenade. Hand grenade? Yeah, I don't think you can destroy a business jet to that degree with a hand grenade. One can say that somebody who was looking like Putin at this event was really on a roll because he destroyed, what did he say, 90,000 Ukrainians, 1,000 units of armored vehicles. In this case, I tend to thank Russian leadership because they picked a very simplistic method of presenting losses when they voice their own losses and mark them as Ukrainian. So essentially, they're letting us know how much they've lost during this summer campaign. So he basically said that Putin-looking figure, he said that Ukraine lost 1,900 armored vehicles of different modifications. But just about a month ago, he said that since the beginning of this summer counteroffensive, Ukraine has lost 18,000 of different vehicles of different class. So why did that change from 18,000 to 1,900? I think he was calling all together vehicles a month ago, but maybe they just corrected their numbers. It's, it's cartoons and propaganda. They still run those cartoons about some fake missiles flying in the direction of the United States and creating some dangerous tsunamis there, and believe that they can do that. I just wanted to outline that the amount of these lies that he's spewing is just showing that Russian leadership treats its citizens just like a toilet, basically, who will tolerate anything. No, I don't think, Nikolai, that's exactly how they think, because they actually do try. They do some tracing of the questions that concern people, and they bring these questions in the communications with president and press briefings. So if they completely were despising their people, they would not be coming out and talk to them. Dictators are actually very dependent on their citizens. I think Yuri likes the memories of Speer, the Minister of Industry of Third Reich, where he noted that when I see how Churchill and Roosevelt treat their people in democracy, we cannot even dream about that. That in America and UK, they force people to, or request people to donate their golden articles, teeth rings, etc., to smelt gold and to buy certain resources. No, we cannot do that in Germany with our citizens. We need to keep being gentle with them, pamper them, while they're still noticing that coffee is becoming more and more fake, butter is becoming more and more mixed with some substitutes, and the whole stability in Germany is crumbling, which is much more difficult for us to sustain, as Speer was remembering. So dictators are much more intimately connected with their people. That's why they like talking from the name of their people and toying with their electors, with their societies. And that's where these Valdai meetings of Putin are coming from. He still wants to try to be somewhat connected to his people. So, do you want to go over the narrative that he mentioned? Yeah, he was pretty sharp on everything that he outlined, regardless if it was sci-fi or what. Let's go. So, first of all, nuclear strike, the response on the strike on territory of Russia will be terrible, but nobody is attacking Russia yet. So his main sensational topic was that he basically said they'll be building a new world order, and then he was explaining why old world order was bad versus the new one. He was explaining and saying that he actually applied to join NATO, so he did everything to be liked by the West, but he was rejected. Then so-called special military operation is aimed at aiming the war that the West was waging for 10 years already. I still don't know whom the West was fighting with, right? Third, Russia did not start the war in Ukraine. Crimea supposedly voluntarily joined Russia and Donbass and area. So Russia is also standing and sending a message against globalization and global capitalism and America affecting everything. So, oh yeah, that's anti-colonial agenda, right? Yeah, he's nodding in the direction of China. And the fact is, NATO was almost a gone organization. It was a shadow of itself by 2014 when Russia attacked Ukraine and revived the whole NATO to a degree. And if Putin is saying that Russia is not looking for new territories, then how does that coincide in his head with the fact that they just celebrated annexing several territories of Ukraine? It was not an anniversary of preventing West from expansion. It was an actual anniversary that they celebrate in Russia for joining these new lands. And Putin is saying that Russia will be the main guarantor of global security and safety. And if anything, Putin is doing everything so the whole world doesn't feel safe anywhere. But the grand narrative, you can appreciate the degree of these lies. So basically, his story is they were harmless, fluffy. They were attacked by everybody. They were rejected by everybody, and they had to somehow go and start resisting. So Kitish town, black armies attacking the white shining city on the hill, right? That's that storyline that he is playing to. And the second option of that is Ketechon, the last, that's more of a Christian world archetype. And it's, again, some sort of a last bastion against the forces of evil. You may want to memorize these two mythologies because they explain a lot in Putin's behavior. Kitishgrad is a Christian pagan story from early paganism and Christianity in Eastern Europe. And Katechon is Christian, definitely Christian mythology, and it can be played, it can be a really bad thing. It's good when it's used theologically, but it's really bad when it's used for politics. So, Yura, what did you want to continue here? Yeah, I wanted to follow on those attacks that Russia wages on citizens and civilians in Ukraine, and many people are asking questions, how should Ukraine answer? I think today, Nikolai, you had a post about hatred, that another effort brooding in attempt to stir more hate due to that attack. And one needs to understand that there'll be more strikes like that. And Ukrainians should not go down to the level of Russian propagandists. Ukraine needs to work like Israel, trying to minimize the civilian losses of our enemy. Yes, they are enemy, but we should not be following in their steps, because with this we will be attacking our own interests, because we see how international community reacts to hits like that. So in this, meaning we should not be losing our head. Sorry to interrupt, Yuri, here. Those whom you mean in your message, Yuri, yeah, you guys want to step on the same plate with Russians? You want to be the same barbaric? One should understand that, of course, it's a trauma of those who just suffered the loss of 50 people. Nobody can stay untouched to that, especially if they are your relatives. But the other is appeals en masse to go and kill Russians everywhere. This is wrong. This is a wrong message, and it should not be coming out of Ukraine. I have to continue explaining here and on all levels, because there are a lot of questions to us coming on all the conferences. Why are you more and more like Russians? I have to continue explaining what are we fighting for. So what are you telling them? I'm telling to those who ask this question that this war is the war against freedom and dictatorship. And then they answer that, yeah, this is great, then we can support you. But there are problems. We have some dictatorship trying to come out internally here. These zombies managed to bite us, and we, in some parts, are turning into the same, and some marginals are trying to, marginal political forces trying to create that into a mainstream narrative. And they need that because only on the mainstream narrative you can grow more. And in reality, Russia is betting on the darkness, on all that gloom and hatred. And pro-Russian layers and pro-Russian propaganda is actually pushing towards that, while our government just doesn't interfere. Whenever these nasty growths show up, reveal themselves in society. So, and sometimes they're toying with them, at least not rewarding these narratives, but they're not hindering them. And that's why this evil continues to propagate. And we're not taking some idiots like Danilov, who's trying to explain his Lugansk past, and Grievous present is trying to present himself as a nationalist, whom he never was, and he is representative of the higher leadership in Ukraine. Fortunately, the others like that are much lower in the rankings, but people understand, I think, in Ukraine and filter him through. But the situation here is, I'd suggest watch Yulia Latynina's stream. To not repeat details, we look like a monkey section of a zoo that keeps throwing shit at each other. That's everything is already smeared, and people just shocked at some of our elements of behavior, especially Americans. We had three pathways: freedom against dictatorship. We had another one, the warriors of light against the genetic garbage that I heard voiced, and the third one, I think, was East against West, anti-colonial, or more like ex-colony against metropoly. On the West, colonial discussion is not really welcomed, is not understood, except for BLMs and some very lefties, Marxists. But they're not the ruling power there. They really do not like colonial message, and it seems very much like a leftist message, a leftist agenda. And they're concerned that we may become another hammer for the left, and they don't want to grow another left-leaning left, extreme left center. So we need to work on that. And second, talks about warriors of light versus genetic garbage. This is a horrible story to begin with. First of all, America is a big melting pot. There are Puerto Ricans, Russians, Vietnamese, Japanese, Chinese, anybody there. They're not about these genetic stores. They're about open society with democratic rules. Nobody cares about your core nationality as long as you can communicate, if you speak Spanish or Japanese or whatever. So the only narrative that is acceptable there, without any tiredness, is on the topic of freedom versus dictatorship. And we're fighting the war on two fronts, versus Putin's dictatorship and versus certain authoritarian trends in our society, and with certain chauvinistic trends that some political forces are trying to copycat from Russia. We're not about that. We're about freedom. The world understands this message: freedom versus dictatorship. This is the same narrative, even the one that Biden administration formulated back in 22, even in 21, when Russia started to deploying troops along the border. And this is the message that is supported. But the moment we start falling into colonial messaging, or even that genetic garbage storyline, this is completely rejected. They feel the taste of ash from Oswiecim and concentration camps behind that messaging, and that causes a great repulsion in our allies. One of the senators, when I was talking to him, asked me a question: are we funding Nazis or what? And that was related to that scandal in Canada with an old ex-Waffen-SS soldier. So he did ask this question from his aides too: why are we supporting Nazis with money? And this is a serious topic. Another one is Moscow Patriarchy in Ukraine. They're also shocked about this story, with this story. They're saying if there are collaborators within this story, arrest those, prosecute those, but do not attack the whole church as the organization. They're all very religious people on the right in the United States. They're very serious people who define half the politics of the United States and at least half the amount of aid. They cannot tolerate attacks on the church as the organization, as for me as well. You can attack and jail personalities if they actually were involved in any crime, treason, whatever. You cannot arrest. You can arrest any member of the society as long as he actually did commit a crime. But you're very we should be very gentle in working with the church as a whole. We need to start a discussion how to reintegrate that into Ukraine. Are we changing the name? Are we changing the certain elements of the name? How it will be working? What's the framework? It needs to be done very gently and with a lot of sense of tact. One cannot trample 6.5 million people, who, by the way, a lot of them are soldiers who are fighting for us on the front from that denomination, just because they are members of the church to which traditionally their families were going to. So this is all visible. This is all paid attention to. It is a very hurting point with our allies, and according to some statistics, I want to drop it here for us to check, not as a statement. About a year ago, only 13% of Americans thought their aid to Ukraine was too much. Now the number is getting close to 40%. And our allies are sending a message that we do not exactly believe that this is freedom versus authoritarianism versus dictatorship, but it seems more and more that it's one type of dictatorship and chauvinism versus the other. And if we do not stop, if we do not halt and get our shit together and do not reflect on where we're going in that vector, we will hurt a lot. Because Russians are throwing 120 billion into this war in their budget this year, and the whole Western aid during this war was only 60 billion. You understand where it goes, right? Regarding very bad, by the way, Alexandra Ustinova today made an interesting statement. She said, if the United States will not vote for additional aid to Ukraine, we will run out of weapons in about a month and a half. According to her words, $5 billion is only just to take whatever was already designated for Ukraine in the United States, but this money cannot be spent. There'll be no money left to buy anything from our partners. And Ukraine is spending $3 billion with a B monthly for weapons. I don't think we can make statements or should be making statements with such detail, but since she indeed bring it up to discussion, we should probably be working with the United States and working systematically with them. This is a serious situation. Yeah, it seems like our leadership doesn't want to change that, understand that the attitude to us is changing in the United States. And of course, they have a beautiful statement: we will be with you to the end. We will not abandon you. We're shocked at what's happening. And of course, they will continue helping, but the degree to which they will is very much determined by our behavior. And okay, Alexey, let's also look about into that Patriarchy question that you brought, the Moscow Church organization here in Ukraine, there are a lot of statements and a lot of proof coming out from different investigations that there's a lot of crime being committed under its umbrella, that there's a lot of Russian spies and Russian collaborators in this organization. Isn't it so? Nikolai, I'm hearing different numbers about many parishioners do they have, from 3 million to 6 million, right? So you want to ban all those millions, or they all participate in terrorism? But it's not about them, it's about the organization. Well, church is not only organization, it consists of two parts. It consists of clerics and of the parishioners. I'm not even talking about the third aspect, that it's continuation of the body of God. But and frankly, churches, if you dig deeper, it's the same thing. If you go in theology, church is one and alike in the world. It's just different denominations. So there are a lot of different people within that church. Some people are fighting on the front, dying for our country, and their mothers in the meantime are forbidden from organizing services if their sons get killed on the front and daughters in this church. So what I'm saying is, yes, if there are figures in this organization who are doing any criminal activity, they should be prosecuted, but they should not be blanketly prosecuted as an organization. And I remind to some of our viewers that Anufri, one of the patriarchs of that Moscow church in Ukraine, at 7 in the morning, the first day of war, he condemned Russian invasion. And he didn't know how it'll go. They could have been in his church in just a day. So we need to be very delicate in how we go follow things. When we just come and slap things left and right, it's not the right way. Just like Dunda, remember that panel in Tallinn when we talked about strategies? When there was a congressman from Ukrainian parliament, Dunda, he was somewhat tolerable in this meeting, but then after this, he came out in his social networks and started spewing stuff about genetic garbage on the Russian side, and some of those being in the church. So he doesn't even think the message through. Like, his message is what? You genetic garbage, and now you go help us fight this war? And that's the congressman. How many congressmen like him we have? We look like a monkey section in the zoo. If we do not change the practices and the ways that we're following, first of all, to the grand narrative of freedom versus dictatorship, nobody will support us. No colonial discussion will generate our allies in the same volume as the first message. No genetic garbage will keep our allies, it'll even turn them away. So then we are risking at going back to our story 100 years ago, when some of the pavians and monkeys dropped and destroyed Skoropadsky project that could give a light to Ukraine, and then after that they lost to Bolsheviks and Ukraine went into darkness for the whole century. All right, so the next message I wanted to touch upon is Slovakia, because we have also a statement from a president of Slovakia now, who said not a single bullet, right? So the president of Slovakia is now paying respect to the voters, supposedly, of that party who was proclaiming no bullets for Ukraine, that her statement is basically confirming with the electors, with the voters. So my question is, this trend revealed itself. People see that, okay, Slovakia is voicing it, and perhaps others may start falling into the same pit. And I do want to bring that, however, this leadership during the elections, that part where that narrative came through, that with that opposition party, pro-Russian party there, that was making statements that Ukraine Nazis were killing Russian troops in Donbass and Lugansk, in Donetsk and Lugansk regions. I think we should be reacting, right? Because that party should have been attacked when they were communicating like that. And I don't know why didn't we address it earlier, Alexey? Yeah, I don't know. We quarreled with Poles, but we forgot to mention Fitz, who was smearing shit over our people, our fighters on the front. presenting some of them as hardcore nationalists, which is absolutely not true. So I want to kind of bring it up in the light of patriarchy that we just talked about. It's all about the measures and how things are worked. We need to have systematic work with all these aspects. Just like with the patriarchy, for example, if we don't want to have Moscow word in the title, let's work systemically with them and over, I don't know, to a certain period of time, maybe a decade, work with them to make sure that the word Moscow goes away. And this is a delicate work. Well, you can be harsh when you work with exact collaborants and criminals, but otherwise you should be very delicate. And it's a process that takes years, it takes decades. And the main thing we needed to do is, for example, in an example of church, switch from political and criminal process to canonical and societal communication process. And police process could go in parallel wherever there was crime. And educational process should have been following. You cannot just tear off the scab and say, yeah, that's how we're going to do it. You cannot take an axe and resolve that delicate issue. And now let's take Fitz and his party, same task, but only in a diplomatic manner, because this is their internal matter of a different country. They have their own specificity there. So one needs to work there even more delicate than with the church. So did we work? Probably not, because we didn't have any reaction to that. Fitz is basically saying same stuff as some of the Moscow Patriarchy clerics here. Same narrative. But you need to work delicately with them because this is a NATO country. You need to make sure there is a communication and address the errors of their messaging. But seems like we're failing in that aspect. So you tell us, Alexey, do you think we can work delicately? You were actually working with the government. You were in what we call special services as well. What do you say? I think majority of our leadership is already at the level of their competence. So one should not expect drastic changes from them. And I want to say that Fitz is also a problem of European Union, because that rhetoric is not fitting with EU and with NATO as well. Now they have to somehow build relations with his government and his party. And we have some parties like that in Europe, like Alternative for Germany, with whom there are still a lot of issues, but they remain within the flow of the European political ecosystem. Can we work with that? Can we work with lobbyism? Do we spend money on that? Poles are spending 1 to 3 million per year. Or what are we spending? Or did we, like that government project when we created some TV show, culinary show, which maybe 300 people watched and we spent millions on it? Are we still amateur hour? Did you want add something about Slovakia as well? Or am I wrong? Yeah, we'll follow the trend. We'll see what's happening. They usually change their rhetoric when they become part of coalition, so they may soften their rhetoric. It's manageable. The main thing is not to repeat the case of Elon Musk, of Moscow Church in Ukraine, and do not fall in that stupid amateur hour of throwing poop at each other. That's not how you work with Elon Musk. That's not how you work with parliament systems of the countries that are in the organization where we want to be part of. And that's not how you work with big groups of 3 and more million people. Even if we just speak pragmatically, Machiavellian type, you have to be delicate. For me, as a person who is working with belief and with faith a lot, it definitely has a lot of levels of delicacy that needs to be addressed. Examples? Here, Ukraine stopped certain arbitrage proceedings with Poland today, right? So we basically backpedaled. So why did we even create this issue? Why were we throwing that poop at each other? Don't we think that it might be much better to be delicate in the way we solve our issues? Hungarians, did we bring the bank out of the list of sanctions? How much foam did we have? How much did we attack Hungary, right? We need to be representative of our capacity. You do not inflate your ego first and then try to catch up with your capabilities. You first build up your capabilities, and then you can take a position. Because it doesn't last long as a politics, as a line. At the beginning of war, when we were, playing on that, on the emotional side, yeah, it worked for a bit. But later the trend changed. We did not adapt to that. We did not pick the right keys of the argument. We did not create right communication with all these groups to affect new systems that are building in the world, where Ukraine is not on the first place, where China is on the first place, where United States are trying to force Europe to spend more on NATO. Europe is trying to force itself to pay NATO in the framework that they promised. Minister of Defense of Britain, on the 18th month of war, is sending a message to all other countries, NATO countries, hey guys, we need to at least adhere to 2%, right? These are realities, and we need to follow the trends. Back in April, we needed to change our rhetoric and strategy from the front to the global politics. Politicians in the United States also demand Ukrainians to conduct elections regardless of war. That's what Washington Post is publishing in their article. A whole group of different congressmen is insisting upon elections in Ukraine next year. I think it's the same group that joined Lindsey Graham when they visited us. And Ukrainian leadership for now is saying that it's legally impossible according to our laws to do that during war, but I still have a question. You've been to the United States, you met with a lot of military and special service experts and politicians. What's their view? What's the outlook there on our elections? Is it consolidated or not? The logic is very basic. It's very primitive. And I'll try to explain it simply. Elections in the United States are going to happen in 2024. In Russia, there'll be elections in 2024. And there is a triangle where we try, together with the United States, win this war. And so in Russia, they re-legitimize Putin, however they are. We know they're fake elections, but still, in the United States, they re-legitimize the government, whether it's Biden government or another one still. And we don't. How does that look like? Every new aid package, every new assistance will be much harder to push through. And regardless, even if we re-elect Zelensky's cabinet, we still need to do that, because without it, there'll be questions. And the mistakes during war, they accumulate, right? That's a lot of mistakes inevitably accumulate especially during war times. So it makes sense to try to reconfirm legitimacy of the ruling group, that they actually have the right to make these decisions, to not let people out of the country, to send people to die on the front. This is a set of difficult decisions that are continuously made daily. And since our leadership are far from angels on all levels, and they're making mistakes not only because people naturally make mistakes, but many of them are ill-intended mistakes. Some of them even steal, and some of them are corrupt. So they understand that in America, and they understand in Europe as well. And they're appealing to us to refresh legitimacy of your government, because there'll be new, supposedly, Russian government, and we know what it will be, but still, there'll be new American government, and you need to stay legitimate in that framework. Because the questions would be, whom are we giving weapons to? Whom are we talking to? Just now, Biden made a statement that they are withdrawing the discussion about 24 billion of aid in Ukraine, and they're thinking what to do with it. And these are legal powers, legal authorities of the United States. They already are withdrawing this proposal, and they're not ready to go forward with it. And what will happen a year later when we go through that 31st of March without re-electing the president, without presidential elections? Then every mistake will be exacerbated after that date. And we need to make sure that we are legitimate. However you do that, email, text message, mail, whatever way you want to do these elections, you have to. Because moreover, I predict that there'll be time when people will be asking and begging us to do the elections internally, because it'll be the only way to avoid some bloody internal conflict. Yeah, this is an interesting story that America actually refused to discuss increasing 25 billion of aid to Ukraine for the next fiscal year. Does it send a direct message White House is sending a direct message that they don't want to dedicate any money to Ukraine because of, generally speaking, Ukraine corruption, that class of thieves, so as we can call it blanketly, that there is no system politics from Ukrainian side to clean these stalls. No, that's not exactly that message, and they don't want to leave us for Putin to devour. Even very populist freaks who are screaming from the pulpit that they need to stop aid, they're saying, well, yeah, we won't stop completely, but to a great degree, this is inner American rhetoric. But the agenda is formed, it exists. And recently, actually today, what's the lead who was there before Borrell, the European Commissioner of Foreign Affairs? He made a statement that we should not be deceiving Ukraine that in 2030 they will join European Union. The country is rather corrupt, and I don't think it's feasible for 2030 as a date. Even we know that we have some problems with corruption. They're real. They still outline and show that, hey, it is not being addressed to a degree that it needs to be in order for Ukraine to join the EU timely. And that's why I keep saying we should not have left the discussion freedom versus dictatorship. This is our key to maintaining ourselves in the right vector. Yeah, I think Die Welt published that Ukraine is considered to be a very corrupt country, and they do not need external management, but they need to conduct systemic work internally, and we need to work to make sure that Ukraine can somehow still be part of European Union. Right. The message freedom versus dictatorship is the message that they will not be tired to defend, because it's part of their own theory, of their own ideas, of their own core. This is what they are about. This is what they defend. And all these other messages about genetic stuff or colonial discourse, this is not appealing. So what we need to do, we need to go back to the discussion of freedom versus dictatorship, if we can. Because they will ask the question, the next question would be, all right, you have freedom versus dictatorship. How are your internal freedoms? And how are our internal freedoms? Do you think they're not aware about TV marathon and one-sided representation, about freedom of speech, somewhat limited, about issues with the way corruption unfolds in Ukraine? And I'm not inventing these titles. I'm just quoting the titles from the Western media. They are writing about the problems that we have. You don't need any evil criticism. You just pick the headlines of their articles, and here is the agenda that we need to work. They don't want to pay for corruption. They don't want to pay to enrichment of our bureaucracy. They don't want to pay for our idiotic grand narrative, which is very different and difficult and to understand for the West. It's far from their ideals. All right, so in your opinion, in Europe and the United States, do they understand the scale of corruption? How many people are involved? Which people exactly need to be addressed? What the groups are in order for that corruption to be changed? Yeah, nobody gives exact numbers, but the general estimations are that the situation is difficult. You heard Juncker, right? He used the word total, right? Not you and me. And that's the gauge that they use. I actually said the word total. I think you said corrupt on all levels. Okay, but that's also a gauge, right? Of the quality. Yeah, in Ukraine, even amongst the expert society, before the London Forum on rebuilding Ukraine, there were some economic experts who said, don't tell us that we're totally corrupt, because otherwise nobody will give us money. Right, this is a wrong approach. Some people were trying to play that we're stigmatized, it's a stigma, and corruption is over-exaggerated. No, this is not a stigma. We have issues, and the West is very mathematic in their approach. They have calculators and they see. We don't even need usually aid with from the West to understand the level of corruption. What, we don't see our own tenders for all the weird constructions? What are we building? A hockey rink in Kherson? Yeah, that triggered me recently in the news. In Kherson, the city near the front line, where they get shelled daily, that's the last thing they need, right? Instead of buying drones and additional defense systems, we need to waste money on some ice rinks. And even from my personal communications with officers on the front and soldiers on the front, that this change in messaging, including anti-corruption, looks like treason for the people on the front line. They think it is treason to... How do you mean? Do not talk about it? Or how do you mean? Well, no, they're very direct. They're saying Russia is attacking us here. Over there, people with guns who are shooting at us. In Russia, there are no elections. Putin is just getting reappointed. Their corruption is on all levels. It's basically part of government leadership. It's systemic. And everybody criticizing us. Yeah, you are discussing that in an interesting way. Okay, but everything falls at the end on the shoulders of the soldier. He's getting shot at and killed by Putin regime and also by our administration that is failing to equip them proper due to the level of corruption that we have, and that all is on his shoulders. This is a very simple situation in its core. He is under-equipped, under-trained, under-provided because some parts of what was designated to go to the front was stolen on the way. It's very banal, but and I keep repeating it. At 250 millions, how much more equipment can you buy for soldiers? UAVs and other things. While these monies are being spent for some tiles, for some flower beds, for repairing certain roads that are not that important, perhaps, okay, there should be a discussion. Why don't we restore the roads that lead to the front, that provide logistics to our warfighters? And maybe provide some masking for the important roads to make sure they're not an easy target. And we don't have that audit, unfortunately. We have some attempts of our bureaucrats to fill in their pockets and coffers. And this all undercuts the ability of our soldiers to fight. And if we go on the global level discussion, Ukrainians can be saying whatever about corruption, that it's a part of a national culture and all, that it's been around for forever. The West just won't supply enough arms to us in this case. Being impressed by our achievements on the front and our soldiers, our warfighters, they still do not want to donate resources to a corrupt government. That's a very simple statement. Guys, please do not forget to click the like button. That's important for us to help us send this message to more eyeballs. And one more thing, guys, I wanted to go to the map, and why I still wanted to address it today. Alexey, perhaps you can talk more about change the strategy. I know you talked with Gardon, and I haven't watched Latinian stream yet, but you did discuss that it is super paramount, important for us to perhaps not exert our efforts on the Eastern Front and perhaps direct it to a greater degree to the south. So I have a question. Why did we spend so much time on Bakhmut? At the beginning of this year, at the end of last year, and these days, what are we doing there? There are a lot of people, a lot of troops fighting, and we left a lot of resources there. So yeah, let me finish here, please. As far as I understand, at the beginning of this year, a lot of troops from the southern front were actually moved to the eastern front. Our troops. Why was it done? And what was the logic? Why was it dictated? I think we declared Bakhmut to be a fortress, and we started to pump up certain personalities as a part of this messaging, from detachments to actual generals. And we made a big trap for Russian troops, of course, but we also wasted a lot of our troops there. Right, we did indeed capture their attention, so Russians were sending a lot of troops on Bakhmut and wasting them there. But we probably should have withdrawn in a systemic order. While we're winning time, we should have been digging the second line, third line, and then retrench there as Bakhmut falls, and then good luck for Russian troops trying to break through, the same fashion as we are trying to break through in the south through their fortifications. Our current leadership will not have an answer to a question, where is our Surovikin's line? There is no good answer, except for the one for which people will ask, and history will ask them, and make certain ones responsible. So, and of course, that did affect, if we did withdraw troops from the south to the east, that moved resources away, so our southern campaign was not as effective as it should have been. In Bakhmut, unfortunately, we were wasting a lot of freshly conscripts as well. That was a tragedy on our side. We didn't need to do that, not in this fashion. Did we want to destroy more Russian troops there? We should. Yeah, we were, but we should be doing it more in terms of a trap. You build Bakhmut up as a mousetrap, and then you take positions around it, give it to Russian troops, and destroy them there. So now if you look at the map, the direction between Kremenная and Svatova, yesterday, 20th Russian Army, with all the proper preparatory, Makiivka, Plashanka. This is a general direction towards Borovaya. And they started well, but they ended really badly. They started properly with artillery preparations, with tanks, with armored vehicles, air support. So there is another group of troops, the Group West, which is near Kupyansky. They're bombing a lot of smaller bridges, trying to attack us there in the future. They're preparing that attack. And you can see how their arrows moving, that they try to do that pincer thing in this front. And I'm sure they'll try to use the artificially created conflict, at least in the media field, between Syrsky and Zaluzhny, that Ukraine perhaps will scream on that front to say, give us a couple more divisions to resist the attack of Russians, and we will not have enough resources for the south, for actions on the south. So they are exploiting the media sphere and our resources that we make too visible for them as a country. And this 20th Army, they were actually attacking according to all the right rules. They lost over tank groups, over 10 tank groups there, and a lot of infantry, and very medium level prepared Ukrainian troops are holding them, because we can when we do it right as well. They have serious troops, they have serious forces. This is probably the most battle-worthy group in Russia that is there, and it is being held now by our mid-level troops. And what I'm talking about is that that is happening even without Surovikin line. If we had Zaluzhny or Syrsky line there, they wouldn't even move anywhere. Now our troops are stopping them in the trenches that were dug with their hands, with their knives and shovels. And if we instead built proper 4 lines of defense, added some concrete, nobody would have even dared to go through there. Why that was not done for 9 years, and why it is not being done during the last year and a half, who can give an answer? This is the blood of our soldiers. Damn it. I'm about to switch to cussing here. It's emotional. Now look here. Somewhat similar to the Baltsev operation, right? Looks like our protrusion going down and they're trying to cut us. But we're not like we were in the Baltseva. They already wasted 4 detachments, 4 paratroopers here trying to cut us. They got their asses kicked, and we even expanding the blue line now and collecting trophies. Also, we're defending the positions that we dug with our own shovels. We're doing that with the shovel-dug trenches. What if we had a professional line there, a professional defense line? How much safer it would have been for our troops and for the whole defense of Ukraine. What the actual fuck? Why was it not done? And you are saying corruption and discussion. This is a part of it. This is a part of the money that did not get to the front that was stolen. The decisions that work for the pocket, not for the front line. When people do not even imagine that they can spend the money this way. When they were fighting in the north, our leadership did not dig a kilometer, a mile of a trench in Lysychansk. One could understand that if Severodonetsk is being attacked, Lysychansk is the next one. It's a satellite settlement, satellite city, so you should bring the equipment and fortify it, right? Why Russians have enough brains to do that and we don't? So here's a scary truth. On the operative tactical, we're much better than Russians. But on the strategic level, they're way better. Of course, they have 80% corruption of everything built into everything they do. But they have a lot of income from oil, and they have great schemas allowing them to bring in some components, and they're using their natural advantages. A lot of resources, natural resources they have, and that our allies are actually interested in buying these resources still. And they play Chinese discussion and balance of systems of the world. They create negotiation platforms, they win time, they mobilize, and they still produce military articles. And we're failing to catch up with all that on our side. So strategically, Russia is doing better last year than we do. Not full year, but for the last 8 years. We have complete battle ham here, and they actually are more organized. And now imagine if the Western aid will dwindle, how fun of a winter we'll have. Our president went to Spain to beg for 6 Hawk systems, air defense systems, on the 18th month of war. Is it real presidential thing? He shouldn't be turning his head in that direction because it's a small supply. It's not his level. He should be working on the level of hundreds, not individual 6 systems. So if we are on this level, that means that we made certain wrong mistakes, certain wrong conclusions before that. We've done something wrong. Whew, that was a rough critique of President Zelensky. That's not even criticism, that's just some reality. I'm actually loving my compatriots, so I'm giving truth in some portions here. If we are going to be completely blunt, 100% truthful on everything that I know, I don't want to hang it in the air, but it's mostly emotional experience. I can talk about some examples, some wounds, I guess. Will gradually show. I'll talk about that eventually. But the main thing is that you don't need to invent anything. You just read Western press, open press. You don't need to find secretive links to some senator materials and all. You just open Western press. Everything is written there, and it's written much harsher than I'm talking about here. I'm talking somewhat softer, preparing my fellow Ukrainians to the truths that we need to understand. I did give an oath to defend this country, If we do not stop the chauvinistic idiocy that some people are trying to make a political norm, if we do not start fighting for freedom, first of all, within the country, expanding the rights of our citizens, because war is an instrument of the foreign politics. If there is no freedom internally, there's not going to be any freedom translated outward, and we'll not be fighting for freedom, and that means we will not get the support we need. We need so direly, right? They'll help only those who are in line with European and Western values. So if we do not change our strategy drastically, I would not even guarantee anything. I can guarantee from my today's point of view, with my level of information, that we probably won't be abandoned completely. So 1918 will not be repeated, but perhaps only part of it will be saved, Or bring a certain version of saving for Ukraine that Ukraine will not be able to resist. Radical change of relations with our immediate neighbors is needed. A radical change of our relations with remote allies, limiting the chauvinist trends in our society, return of more freedom, and make sure we return the grand narrative of freedom versus dictatorship, and we need to have that freedom internally. If real freedom of citizens are limited and authoritarianism and corruption is growing, nobody will believe us. We need to show with our actions. Actions are what's important. That's it. All right. One more important question in this stream. You earlier, analyzing the front line, you said that it's a very realistic goal, Takmak and exit to Azov Sea. And in all that, it's still a protrusion, right? It's still a protrusion going down. See, Nikolai, when I was saying that, I was hoping that our leadership will make certain measures, important measures. They had a window of opportunities when these measures could be taken. They failed to take it timely. And they continued that same idiotic strategy: fewer troops to the south, more troops to the east, and allowed Russians time to drop more reserves to the south. And we've been winning for quite a long time. Out of 4.5 months, for 3.5 months, we've been faster and better. We were breaking apart their reserves and attacking different locations, and then we fucked up. We didn't take the right decision. And then on the West, we had one trends, and then because of other trends, they changed. For example, impeachment to Biden, right? It was difficult to predict that. It's not an analytical category, it's very subjective. But their inner political fighting became much sharper, and that is reflected on their amounts of aid to Ukraine. So I guess you can accuse me of not foreseeing impeachment of Biden, that Republicans will try to impeach him. Sorry, I guess I should have. So we have failed to take certain timely decisions. Russians made certain decisions, and there were political processes that changed things in Europe and the United States. And now we have a slightly different situation, a very different situation. And now we need to adapt to that. So we need to send the right message to make sure that people understand what's happening. And if we do not reflect on that, if we do not change, it'll be a complete foobar for us with like triple F at the beginning. So we need to send signals as is. It's not a change of measured optimism to measured pessimism. It's just situation changed, and my words are congruent with the current situation because of it changed. If the situation changes again, we will change the messaging too. Right now, and maybe that will change. We have still a solution to get to Tokmak, to break the railroad line, Melitopol-Volnovakha, the upper supply line on the southern front in Russia, and put them in a critical position, so they have to defend their positions in winter steppes. That's not exactly a good thing to do, an easy thing to do. They'll be losing their capacity. They'll suffer, and use the things that we still are getting from the West: high-precision missiles, artillery, and F-16s at some point will be there, right? Army needs to be provided additional resources as well, and aggregate during 6 or 9 months additional forces that will allow to resist Putin's mobilization if he manages to conduct one after his re-elections, and he is aggregating that potential. Or if they fail to mobilize, then perhaps we can start a next wave of campaign, maybe in the end of spring next year. And that would be the politics at this point. I don't think it's doable now to break through to the sea. A month and a half ago, that was very doable. Right now, I think we've lost this opportunity. And this is not being said as propaganda. We actually indeed have this capability, this chance to do that. We just failed to make a timely decision, damn it, instead of making the PR speeches on the top level. Very complete. Thank you, gentlemen. Yuri is smiling there. Do you want to add something here? Maybe a quote or something? No, I don't think I can add much here. What else to add? I just want to say that there were some screams that Germans will not give Taurus missiles, but are suggesting to give us RST and some Jeopards, I think 6 or something. So I want to say to all those screamers, stop being concerned with Germans. Germans are giving us exactly what Americans are telling them to give us. They're not exactly free in deciding what are they supplying to Ukraine, just like it happened with Abrams and others, other military toys that they gave us. Americans are the ones defining German policies on this. Germany is not independent, and they don't want to be independent. Germany does not want to be independent in this matter because they have a lot of relations with Russia as well, and giving us certain weapons basically puts them in precarious position because NATO is only supported by America. America needs to say, yes, that's okay to do that. All right. Thank you all. Have a good night. Do not forget to subscribe to Alexey's channel, Alpha Media, Yuri Romanenko, and to the privateer station that is bringing you these translated materials. See you on Saturday.